This channel is for mature audiences only. If you're underage on this channel, your parents' mom should have swallowed them or spit them out.
What's good? This is the Ghost, aka Tico, Tren, aka Internal Sadist, and this video is going to be about my theories on black women in this day and age. It's basically going to be about the my theories on single motherhood and black women for all intents and purposes. Because lately, a lot of people have been talking about it, and a lot of people's been talking around it, and a lot of people's views on it has been like kind of skewed or kind of sort of based on, race or pop culture and shit like that for all intents and purposes. So I'm gonna talk about my views on the whole entire thing and why I think it is and why I think the single motherhood actually exists at a high rate in the black community. This is just basically a theory. Um so don't get too crazy with it, or don't get crazy with it, or don't run with it too hard, basically, but it's just basically nothing more than a theory. My thoughts on the single motherhood in the black community is that don't get me wrong, it is very high. The same thing goes for the abortion rates in the black community is very high as well too. Um, the only thing different is that the only thing different between them is the fact that nothing really. It's like you, you pretty much lead the rates. You pretty much, and that's something I've always found funny. How do you lead the rates in abortions and single motherhood at the same damn time? It's something that I've always found funny in American world and in the African American world for all intents and purposes. You lead the charge in abortions and you lead the charge in single motherhood, which makes me think like, what are you doing to actually get yourself into this situation, basically? Um, because at the end of the day, it's one of those things where I've always said, like, serious and bad decisions to actually get you to the point where you are right now. And if you make a series of bad decisions to do so, I can understand how you can end up in a situation you are without fail, or end up in a situation you are and actually see it coming from a mile away. It's basically like how I say about African American women when they do the same daggone thing, but they claim that they're living their own life or they're doing their own thing. And the sad part about that, they're literally mimicking every other African American woman that came before. Well, except for great grandma and stuff like that, because great grandma actually had a good head on her shoulders, and she would have never done any half the stupid shit that these young girls do nowadays. And it's kind of sad watching it, watching a whole entire society or a whole entire group of people, literally run themselves into the ground or run themselves out of existence, sadly, or give themselves no leg up in the world for all intents and purposes, and then wonder why everybody else is, shitting on them at the same time. You can't really be the type of people that, are, looked at or sought after or loved and admired if you're really, really, if you're really, really not on board for, loving yourselves in the first place, sadly. But to get to the topic at hand, the very problem that plagues the black community is the fact that there's a huge single motherhood subsection of the black community that exists. And my theories on it was that I personally think the theory behind it is that black women were never really meant to do anything other. African American women were never really meant to do anything other than to breed. And people are going to say, well, Tico, that how do you know this or what's this? Well, if you actually go back to the slave trade, that's pretty much all they really were for was to breed, so they can make bigger, stronger slaves, so we can actually not have to transport more slaves. Basically, um, it is what it is. So I believe that African American women were never really meant to be to get together and settle down tight. Basically, I believe that they were just meant to breed and continue to breed for all intents and purposes. So when you hear one get an abortion, it's like, well, that was probably against design, but we'll run with this. And the sad part about that, matter of fact, if you actually read a lot of the manifesto and a lot of the journals from back in the day, you'll typically run into a lot of stuff where they literally said they literally buy slaves based on how they look and like their animals. So they basically breed them like their animals, basically, just so they can have the next generation of slaves for all intents and purposes. And that is why I believe personally why black women literally are mostly always single or mostly always single mothers. Because in the history of Americas, they basically what their job was to breed so they can raise the next generation for all intents and purposes. I don't really, for some odd reason, African American women have the highest rates of single motherhood out of the whole entire world. Um, also lead the world in abortions too, which is actually pretty ironic once you think about it. So not only do they lead the lead the world in single motherhood, but they lead the world in abortions as well. So it's like one of those things where it's one of those things where you have to pick and choose on what is it you want to do with your life, or what is it you want to what's up, heartbroken kid. It's one of those things where you have to pick and choose what is it you want to do or how you want to handle your life for all intents and purposes, because at the end of the day it's one of those things where you have to understand where you're going and who you are, or what it is about you that has you in the mess that you're in, or what it is about your history that has you making the decisions that you make. And the sad part about that is the sad part about that is when it comes down to it, your history determines your future. No matter how much you like it or not, your history always will determine your future. At the end of the day, the sad part about that is you can always change your history or overcome your history if you're willing to actually do so. The irony to it is if you're not willing to do so and you're trying to forget it, or you're trying to pretend like it didn't exist, or you're trying to make it seem as if it wasn't all that big of a deal, you typically will find out very quickly that it was a big deal. And the sad part about that is sometimes you have to unlearn things, and sometimes you have to move forward in life and not be caught up in the rigmarole of pop culture or things. Because the sad part about that, at the end of the day, it don't matter how much you like it, pop culture affects you in a way where you start doing things that aren't really you, or aren't or against the grain for all intents and purposes. It's typically how it works. And the sad part about that is I'm not dumping on black women. I'm not saying, this, that, and the other about black women. I'm basically saying my honest opinion, or my honest analysis, or my honest assessment on black women is I don't believe they were ever really meant to actually be in a relationship. I just believe at the beginning, when it comes to African American women, they were just meant to actually just breed. So I'm not shocked to see the high rates of single motherhood in Americas. Only thing I am shocked about is to see the high rate. Actually, no. Then again, I'm actually not really shocked to see the high rate of abortions in the African American community either, as well. Because at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, it's one of those things where you have to put two and two together and actually think beyond, you know, it's this person's fault or it's the black man's fault or it's, he left me. Because the sad part about that, it's a series of bad decisions. And if you can make a bad decision, you're in on a bad decision just as much as that person's in on a bad decision. The sad part about that is if that person was only with you to bust a nut, then you can't blame the person for not sticking around if that person was only with you to bust a nut at the end of the day. That goes for any group of women in this whole entire world. If a person doesn't want to be in a relationship and all they really wanted was to smash, you can't be mad when they don't stick around later at the end of the day. That means you made a bad decision or you took a risk, gambled, and lost greatly, sadly. That's all it really is. And the sad part about that is women try to escape the world of responsibility and place it on men to the point where it's getting kind of out of hand and ridiculous. It's like, well, you kind of got to take some fault in this because at the end of the day, you're stuck holding the bag. And if you're stuck holding the bag, you can't sit up here and be like, well, your father left us. Well, did the father even want to be a father? Did the father was the father even aware that he actually had a child? Or is it one of those things where it's like, well, did you have a child to trap the man? Because the sad part about that is a lot of women basically have children to trap men. And a lot of women basically, well, believe in their mind that if they have this child, the relationship would get better because there's this twisted notion in their mind that, he will love you because you're having his baby. When in fact, that's never really been the case. Because at the end of the day, if a man really loved you, he wouldn't just want to smash and dash for all intents and purposes. If a man really loved a woman, there wouldn't be this high rate of single mothers. Now the sad part about that is now it's starting to spill out into other groups of women for all intents and purposes now because they think that this is the way to keep a man basically, or if a man's not, if a man's unsure if he want, they kind of figure if a man's unsure if they want to be with them, this is a surefire way to get them to stay or get them to want to stay for all intents and purposes, when in fact that's not really a surefire way to want to get a man to stay at the end of the day. It's one of those things where it's like you believe in your mind, so you want to try to push the notion that it's okay, when in fact it's really not. So you end up being a breeder to a man that never really wanted to be with you in the first place, thinking that by having his baby, he'll stick around and he'll love you forever. And the sad part about that is that's what it is. Now, don't get me wrong. There are the black women who drive fathers away with their attitude. Yeah, that's pretty much all it really has ever been. Like you have an attitude, so it's time to go. you know, I'm about to bounce. I don't feel like dealing with your attitude. I want to deal with my child, but I don't want to deal with my attitude. And the sad part about that is because of the Duluth model when it comes to children. When it comes to the Duluth model, when it comes to children, it's basically one of those things where like they basically know they can extract as much resources out of a man as humanly possible because that's basically what women do. Extract resources from a man via the government or extract resources from the government via the man basically. And the sad part about that is at the end of the day, if you know female nature, you can't really be mad about them finding another avenue to extract resources. I basically talked about that in another stream where I said there's a lot of women like pre 80s who a lot of women pre-80s who used to a lot of women pre-80s that used to actually have children and not put their name, put their the father's name on the birth certificate back in the day. And the reasoning for that was because at the end of the day, it was it's easier to actually collect it's easier to collect what's it called, welfare benefits if the father's name is not on the birth certificate. You can put unknown, therefore they won't go after anybody. You won't have to worry about going anything and through any litigation to get welfare if you want welfare, basically. So a lot of mothers didn't put the father's name on the birth certificate so they can have an easy path to welfare. That's actually a lot. That's actually a decent section of the single mother population. That's basically how they get it. Because the sad part about it, if the father's name is on there, you have to take the father to court for child support just so you can get welfare at the end of the day. In most states, that's basically how you have to do it. You basically have to take the father to court to get, welfare, so you can actually get so you can actually take him to court so you can do this shit. And like I was saying at the beginning, I believe that African American women weren't really ever meant to actually be in a relationship. I believe that they were meant to just breed at the end of the day, and breed unlike any other group of women for all intents and purposes, for survival purposes. And if you actually, like I was saying, if you actually go back into history, that's pretty much what their jobs pretty much were. I mean, granted, they were in a cotton field and they did do housework and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, you basically take the biggest, strongest male slave and the best doe or woman, and you basically put them together just so you can get more out of them, basically, or better children for the future of your workforce for all intents and purposes. So it's sad to say it, but it's sad to say it, but at the end of the day, it's one of those things where you have to understand as a human being what you're put here to do. And if you can't keep a man, there's probably a line of reasoning behind the reasonings on why you can't keep a man. It is what it is. So if you can't keep one, it's not the man's fault. It's probably your fault, especially if you keep on running into this relationship problem. It's not a man's fault. It's basically your fault after a while. Because at the end of the day, if you run into one man, you run into two men, you run off three men, you run off four men, the only common denominator in all those relationships is yourself. Especially if you're picking a man that just wanted to smash, basically. Because what I've noticed with a lot of these women that are single mothers is they'll try to say that they don't need anybody, but they'll run around here with serious thirst traps, basically. Like they'll run around here with their cleavage hanging out, or they'll run around here with thongs on, and you watch them bend over to deal with their kid with a thong on, basically. It's like, okay, you wonder how you got into the situation in the first damn place. Surprise! You know, it's like surprise. Like, it's one of those things where, like, it kind of reminds me of that one meme. Surprise, motherfucker! No. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's one of those things where you have to basically understand why they're actually in the situation they're in. Oh, what's up, No Name? What's up, Win? What's up, America's a Bill? The reason why the list like ratios like that is because basically people basically disliked it before the video even started because they thought I was going to dump on women. So they basically disliked it before the video even started, sadly. So I was laughing about that when I seen it before it even started. What's up, Psyche Soap? Psyche Soap! But yeah, the sad part about that is at the end of the day, it's one of those things where you have to understand why you're in the situation you're in, why it is you're stuck the way you are, and you have to understand your part in the whole entire thing, or your if well in some cases referred to as the cog, what cog you are in the wheel, basically. Are you the big cog or the small cog? Or are you the cog that makes everything go around? Or if you're the cog that, pretty much, yeah. And the sad part about that is, oh, Psyche, so there's a FYI, tomorrow we're going to have table flip again. So table flip is coming back, which is actually going to be interesting tomorrow. So we're going to have table flip. Yeah. Table flip. Yeah. We're going to be flipping them tables. But yeah, when it comes down to it, it's one of those things where you have to understand and make it so that it's better for you at the end of the day, or make it so that not really, it's not really, or a part, it's basically, you got to mitigate your problems basically so you can understand where it's coming from and why it's actually happening to you on a regular basis. And if you can't mitigate it and make it better, then you're always going to be stuck in the situation you're in. If you can't take responsibility for your actions, then shit is actually going to happen to you on a regular basis. And you can't blame nobody else but yourself at the end of the day. You can't really you can't really well, you can blame people, but the sad part about that is at the end of the day, is it really their fault? Or is it really your fault in not accepting the fact that the person didn't really want you in the first place? Is it your fault for not accepting, you know, for accepting a lie in the first place just so a person can get in your pants? Because at the end of the day, I've always said if a person can be swayed by a pickup line, that's not really relationship material. It's not relationship material in the least bit. And people know this, but people don't want to take responsibility for this, because if you could be tricked into bed or tricked your clothes tricked off of you by a pickup line, then obviously you're not high value nor are you relationship material. If a person got a run game on you, basically, you're basically an easy target for all intents and purposes, or you basically listen to what's cool at that moment. So that means you make decisions based on temporary things, basically, that make you feel good about yourself. When in fact, which actually lets me know you actually have, what actually really lets me know you pretty much has a low self esteem or a low opinion of yourself if a pickup line gets you, or a something along the lines of that gets you to want to jump into bed with somebody after a while. And the sad part about that is, like, you have a very low opinion of yourself and you have very low value at the end of the day. Hate to say it, but if that's your case and that's what you strive for, is to basically be a side chick or another chick, basically, you basically are nothing more than a side chick, and you basically have no other reason, but no other person to blame but yourself at the end of the day. Because the sad part about that is, if you're going to choose to walk down that path, you got to understand the situation and the repercussions and consequences to your actions at the end of the day. And if you don't understand the repercussions and consequences at the end of the day, then you can't really call yourself a high value person, or you can't refer to yourself as a strong, independent woman when in fact you make childish mistakes. You can't be strong and independent and make very, very poor decisions and mistakes on a regular basis and expect to be seen as such. You can't really you can't really be you can't really be somebody who can be seen as high value when you make poor decisions at the end of the day. You can't be seen as somebody who is, you know, any of that stuff if you're not doing what you need doing what you need to do properly to be a better human being. Because the sad part about that is, you're basically making bad decisions. Making a continuous you're making continuous bad decisions at the end of the day. Let it be you choose this person, let it be um you're dating this person, or let it be because you decide that for some odd reason you want to make it so that you're a part of something or feel better about yourself. The sad part about that is if you need that to feel better about yourself, then you've already lost the battle. If you need somebody to want you to feel better about yourself, then you pretty much already lost. You took that L. You might as well just sit down and accept it at the end of the day. But when it comes to the abortion rates, I'm not shocked by it in the least bit. Like I said, at the end of the day, if you actually look at history of America, African American women were meant to breed. And the sad part about that is typically they put the biggest, strongest man with the most with any woman basically to breed out to make it better. Most times they put the biggest, strongest man with the biggest, strongest woman to get a man with a better work ethic, basically, to get the best slaves out of people for all intents and purposes. And the sad part about that is when you see an abortion, it's one of those things where it's like I can kind of see why abortions actually happen based on slavery. I can see why abortions actually happen based on how the community thinks and what they believe. Because the sad part about that is like it's one of those things where it's like educated Lane's baby got to go, but Chad and Tyrone's baby get to stay, or Pookie and Ray Ray's baby always stays. If I notice, because I noticed Chad and Tyrone's baby actually gets aborted too. They don't get aborted at the same rate that educated Lane's baby get aborted, but Chad and Tyrone's baby. I mean, Tyrone's baby gets aborted more than way more than Pookie and Ray Ray's baby. Pookie and Ray Ray's baby is more likely to stick around than Chad and Tyrone. Tyrone's baby for all intents and purposes, sadly. So I'm not shocked when I see a lot of Pookies and Ray Rays running around for the fact that a lot of women will keep Pookie and Ray Ray's baby over Tyrone's baby over the educated Lane's baby at the end of the day. And the sad part about that is they think because they're out there selling these drugs that they're always going to have this constant flow of income when they take them to court. What they forget to realize is selling drugs isn't really a legal job. So if you take that person to court, they're probably going to go away forever or a long time, and you'll never really get the money out of the person at the end of the day. It's pretty much how it works. Now, if you would have had educated Lane's baby, you would probably got all the money in the world out of the person, but you didn't have educated Lane's baby, so now you're screwed. And this is how I know that people aren't thinking. This is how I know you're thinking short term. This is basically how I know how women are thinking short term instead of long term, because at the end of the day, if you were smart, you would have had educated Lane's baby, and you could have been getting money and sitting pretty for the rest of your life. Whereas no, you had Pookie and Ray Ray's baby, and now you're waiting for the money to come in, and he's just in prison, and you know the prison system would only give you but so much money on how much he made when in fact he never really had a job, basically in the first damn place. Whereas Tyrone's baby, women who have Tyrone's baby are basically suffering the same damn thing, if not a little less, basically, because they get welfare on the strength that Tyrone actually has a job. Whereas Pookie and Ray Ray, they try their best to scrounge around to actually get money out of them, and it's not really working too well. So Pookie and Ray Ray end up in jail quite often, or Pookie and Ray Ray don't go to jail, which I've noticed a lot of Pookie and Ray Rays actually don't go to jail. And typically women don't send them to jail because they know that if they send them to jail, they can't get no money out of them, sadly. So there are some smart women out there that would actually think 3 steps ahead and say, well, if I send Pookie and Ray Ray to jail, then how am I going to get money for child support? And typically a lot of these women would actually not put Pookie and Ray Ray on the birth certificate so they can collect welfare. It's typically how it works. So if they do that, they can collect welfare and they can get money from Pookie and Ray Ray on top of that. Whereas Chad and Tyrone, they're spending time in jail. Tyrone's spending time in jail, and educated Lane, his baby got aborted any damn way, so he ain't got to worry about the shit because he was seen as an educated Lane. So you got to delete his baby. And the sad part about that is, if you were thinking long term, like I said, you would have educated Lane's baby. That way, you can collect money on educated Lane's child for all intents and purposes. It's sad, but it's true. But the sad part about that is nobody ever thinks that far ahead, and they want to believe that they think that far ahead. And they might be, oh, the reason why you're seeing that no name is because it's basically being ran on 2 channels. That's why. Um, it's being ran on 2 channels. It's actually being ran on 3 if you count Twitch. Um, so that's why you're seeing all these different chats. Basically, they're mainly pouring in from the Vedic Ghost channel and the Internal Sadist channel for all intents and purposes. But at the end of the day, it's one of those things where you have to understand the situation you're in to better accommodate the situation that you're not trying to be a part of. To run this two. And the sad part about that is a lot of women actually don't have. A lot of women don't have these a lot of these skills like cooking and stuff like that on to keep a man. The sad part about that is at the end of the day, no matter how much you like it or not, you still got to have these skills to keep a man around. Like I was saying when Dusty was in my stream talking about why you capping, I literally know women that can't fucking boil water to save their fucking life. I literally dated a woman for a little bit, and then I eventually broke up with her after I taught her how to boil noodles and hot dogs, anything that you could possibly boil. That way she can actually have something to learn so she can actually survive as a human being. I literally taught her how to boil water and boil hot dogs and boil noodles and shit like that, just so she can actually live and not actually eat out every day. Because the sad part about that is she used to literally eat out every day because she couldn't cook a damn thing, and I literally had to teach her how to cook. I literally taught her how to boil water just so she can live. I literally taught her how to heat up food in a toaster oven just so she can eat and learn to do shit like that. I mean, don't get me wrong. People can say I'm full of shit all you want to, but how many women nowadays do you know can actually cook? Now, is it a far stretch to believe that a woman don't know how to boil water? And the sad part about that, there's a lot of men that don't know how to boil water. And back in the day, that used to be reasonable and understandable that there was a lot of men that don't know how to boil water. But when I say I know a bunch of women who can't boil water, y'all want to say I'm capping. Like, no, there's no lies over here. I tell the truth all the fucking time. I know a lot of women who can't boil water. And the sad part about that is, at the end of the day, if you can't boil water or you can't cook, a man's not going to see you as a viable relationship, because at the end of the day, he needs to know that you can actually feed the children properly without going out to the store and buying food for all intents and purposes, or without any of this stuff going on. Like, because think about it. What part of that actually says to you, if you think about it as a woman, what part of that says to you that you can't cook? What part of that says to you that you're relationship material? Because at the end of the day, if a man's working and you're working and he's not home to actually feed children, who's actually feeding the children if you can't cook? Oh, McDonald's, got it. Or, oh, Wendy's, got it. Or, oh, this restaurant over here, got it. It's like, well, do you have any life skills to actually keep the children actually fed? Because at the end of the day, a lot of these restaurants put a lot of GMO and all this extra shit in the food, and you wonder why your child is fat, or you wonder why your child is overweight or obese, or your child has diabetes, high blood pressure, and high cholesterol. And the sad part about that is the way you feed your children is the reasoning behind why they have these problems at the end of the day. If you fed your children properly, you wouldn't have to worry about any of these problems. In other words, sad part about that is you don't, so you end up running into a problem where it kind of sucks for you and your children. It's sad, but it's true. But it is what it is. And it's one of those things where you have to basically overcome the problems so you can actually be a better human being at the end of the day. and you have to basically be able to overcome any and all situations and obstacles so you can make it so it's better for you and your future self-esteem. Future for your future offspring. I say self-esteem down. Well, your self-esteem too, because the sad part about that is when you can't do things, you typically don't feel good about yourself. The sad part about that, when you accomplish goals and you accomplish things in life, you typically tend to feel better about yourself. You typically tend to feel as though you can take on the world, or you feel a shit ton better about who you are as a human being at the end of the day. Because sadly enough, when you're not doing things for yourself, or you can't do things for yourself, you typically run into the problem of, this things. And you typically run into the low self-esteem, the lack of, you know, future prospects basically to help you in life. The sad part about that, like I said, it's one of those things where like you have to learn to make better decisions. You have to learn to make better life choices. And you have to unlearn a lot of shit basically to make it so, a lot of brainwashing, a lot of shit to basically make it so that you're better suited for the market, the dating market in general. Because at this point in time, everybody just views you as breeders, sadly. Um, and it is what it is. And the sad part about that is you can't really blame anybody for viewing you as a breeder when you actually treat yourself as a breeder within itself. Or you look to life like, well, if I have this baby, he'll stick with me and he won't leave me, and then he ends up leaving you, and now you're upset, and now you want to say all men ain't shit, basically, which is pretty much how it pretty much always plays out or pans out, sadly. So there's always that thing where there's always that notion that, you're being treated unfairly when in fact you're actually being treated very fairly. Once you actually think about it, you're being treated at fair market value based on how you view yourself or how you see yourself. That goes for any woman. You can't view yourself negatively and expect the market to give you a better return. You can't view yourself personally in a negative light, but then try to project this fake projection of yourself and expect the market to return that fake projection of yourself, because you'll find out very quickly that no man wants to stick around with you, or men only want to use you for what your value actually is. If you're just a breeder, you're just a breeder. That goes for black, white, Chinese, Puerto Rican, Asian, Latino, anybody. You're pretty much just a breeder at that point in time, because that's what your market value is, sadly. And the sad part about that is, like I said, you're basically living life through you're basically, and if you're in a situation where you're a single mother, or you're in a situation where you've actually made these decisions, it's nothing more than a series of bad decisions at the end of the day. And you have nobody to blame but yourself, sadly. So, like I said, it's sad and true, but you have to basically be able to overcome that situation, or you have to be able to overcome the odds or obstacles that makes it so that you're in this situation, to make it so that you're not going to be no longer in that situation. Because if you can't, then it's going to be a very, very bad trap time for you at the end of the day. And it's not going to really ever pan out in your favor at the end of the day. But what about divorces? Well, it's very hard to get a divorce when you're never married. The black community has, it's like, if you're not married, then how are you getting a divorce at the end of the day? If you basically made a decision to sleep with a person, have a child before marriage, you can't really rely on divorce to actually get you through it. So divorce would end up being a whole nother topic within itself. I mean, don't get me wrong, divorcees is basically another decision within it, another bad decision within the decision. Don't get me wrong, short term, it sounds great that you're getting the bag, because that's pretty much what you want and all you really wanted in the beginning. So you should have just, child support the person, but I guess going to court for something is like too much unless you can get a lot of money out of it. So therefore, divorce is the next best lottery for women for all intents and purposes. So getting a divorce and taking a man to the cleaner is the best bet. That is your best bet in the whole entire world. But if you never made it that damn far, your only bet is child support at the end of the day, because divorce requires the state to be involved and to overlook a lot of the stuff just so you can get the maximum out of that man. Sad part about that, if you never make it to marriage, you can't really get a divorce. And the sad part about that is, at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, it's one of those things you have to understand. You went from one household being taken care of to two households being taken care of. So, in all technicality, are you still really living the life that you want to live as a divorcee? Like, think about that. If you went from having cars and a lot of money coming into one house to, the finances being split between two houses and you only get a percentage of the finances, are you really gaining anything out of it? The sad part about that is what I've found out is a lot of divorced women end up being broke after a while and trying to take the man back to court for more money. A lot of women end up just being broke or going broke, or mismanaging the money to the point where they don't have any more money, or they run out of money faster than a single man with a menial labor job. Basically, it's like, how do you do that? How do you get this much money from a man and blow through it all? And it's like, it's just habit. It's a bunch of different habits that they have. It's a bunch of different habits that they have to make it so that they basically run into a series of bad decisions. The sad part about that is, by making these decisions and making these jumps and leaps and what they think is right, they basically made a bunch of bad decisions, and this is how they ended up in the situation that they're in, sadly. But yeah, it's one of those things where even divorced women end up in poverty. I mean, Grant, don't get me wrong, divorced men do end up in poverty, but the sad part about that is, at the end of the day, he typically can make some type of comeback. I mean, Grant, it's not going to be the greatest comeback, but he can make some type of comeback and make it so that he can actually, survive somewhat. The neat thing about the job market nowadays is there's a lot of under the table jobs that actually can help men mitigate all that stuff. Or there's a lot of 1090 jobs that I can actually help men mitigate paying out a shit ton of money to women at the end of the day. It's one of those things where it's like, if you have a 990 job, if you own a business, you can basically say you only pay yourself this much money. If you are under the table, you basically don't really have a job. So therefore, how's she going to get all this money out of you? So it's one of those things where, by having an under table job or a 1090 job or 1099 job, you basically can mitigate a lot of your damages by saying you only make X amount of money at the end of the day. But that's about enough for tonight. Y'all be blessed, be good. I don't want to drag this stream on no longer than it already is. It's on, if you missed it, it's on the Vedic Ghost channel, and it's on the Internal Sadist channel. It's also on Tico Tren Twitch channel. If you got my Twitch, if you follow me on Twitch. But yeah, that's pretty much my hypothesis on black women. You be good to yourself and treat yourself like milk and do nothing but spoil yourselves. This goes for men and women, transgender, gay, straight, anybody. Always treat yourself like milk, do nothing but spoil yourself. And always try to be a better version of yourself, no matter what, if you like it or not, at the end of the day. This is Vedic Ghost, aka Internal Sadist, better known as Tico Tren, and I'm signing off.
This channel is for mature audiences only. If you're underage on this channel, your parents' mom should have swallowed them or spit them out.
You look like it. Yeah.